Most people think their problems start in the middle of the day. They think it's the job, the pressure, the people, unexpected obstacles. But the truth, an uncomfortable truth, is that the day was already lost long before any of that showed up. It was lost in the first hour, because the way you begin is not a small detail. It's a psychological declaration. It's you telling your mind whether you're in control or whether the world gets to decide who you are today. When you wake up, your brain is in a vulnerable state. Neuroscience tells us this is when habits imprint most deeply, when identity is quietly reinforced. If the first thing you do is reach for your phone, scroll through other people's lives, consume noise, chaos, and comparison, you've already placed yourself in a reactive position. You've told your mind, I respond, I don't lead. And that message echoes through every decision you make afterward. How you talk, how you work, how easily you get distracted, how quickly you get frustrated. Unstoppable people understand this at a philosophical level. They don't see the morning as a routine. They see it as a ritual of dominance. Not dominance over others, dominance over self. Because before you can conquer anything external, you have to establish internal order. The morning is where that order is built. It's where intention replaces impulse. It's where discipline speaks before emotion gets a chance to argue. This isn't about waking up early just to say you did. Time alone doesn't make you powerful. What matters is what you do with that time. Do you move your body to remind yourself that you're alive and capable? Do you sit in silence long enough to hear your own thoughts instead of drowning them out? Do you feed your mind with something that strengthens it instead of something that entertains it? These choices may look small, but psychologically, they're massive. They shape your self-image, and self-image quietly controls behavior. There's a philosophical principle here that most people ignore. You become what you repeatedly practice before anyone is watching. The morning is private, no applause, no validation, just you and your habits. That's why it's honest. That's why it's revealing. If you can show up for yourself when no one is demanding anything from you, you're training your mind to act from principle, not pressure. And that's the difference between people who last and people who burn out. Think about it. When your morning is chaotic, rushed, unintentional, your nervous system stays elevated all day. You're reactive, impatient, easily thrown off. But when you start the day with structure, even a simple structure, you send a signal to your brain, I'm safe, I'm prepared, I'm in control. From that state, focus becomes easier. Discipline feels lighter. Decisions become clearer. You're not fighting yourself all day long. And here's the part most people don't want to hear. Mornings expose excuses. Everyone says they want more discipline, more clarity, more success. But the morning asks a direct question. Are you willing to sacrifice comfort consistently? Because comfort is loud in the morning. Sleep feels good. Avoidance feels good. Delay feels justified. But unstoppable people understand that every time they choose comfort first, they teach their mind that resistance wins. Over time, that lesson becomes character. Winning the morning doesn't require perfection. It requires intention. It requires deciding ahead of time who you're going to be before the world makes its demands. When you win the morning, you don't just feel productive, you feel grounded. And that grounding carries you through pressure, through setbacks, through days when motivation disappears. Because when the morning belongs to you, the day doesn't control you, you control the day. And if you can control the day consistently, you're no longer hoping for a better life. You're building one morning at a time. After the morning sets the tone, something else has to carry you through the hours when enthusiasm fades. And that something is discipline. Most people misunderstand discipline because they think it's emotional. They believe it shows up when they feel inspired, when the energy is high, when the conditions are right. But discipline has nothing to do with how you feel. Discipline is a system. It's a decision you made in advance that no longer requires negotiation. Psychologically, motivation is unreliable because it's tied to mood. Mood shift based on sleep, stress, feedback, and circumstances. If your progress depends on motivation, then your progress is at the mercy of variables you can't control. That's why so many people start strong and fade fast. They mistake emotional momentum for personal strength. Discipline, on the other hand, is strength that doesn't need emotion to function. Unstoppable people train themselves to act even when there's no internal reward. They don't wait for excitement to arrive, they move first, trusting that clarity and energy will follow action. This is a deep psychological principle. Behavior shapes belief more reliably than belief shapes behavior. When you consistently do what you said you would do, your mind begins to see you as someone who keeps promises. That self-trust becomes fuel. Confidence stops being something you hype up and becomes something you experience. There's also a philosophical shift that has to happen. Discipline isn't punishment, it's freedom. At first, structure feels restrictive because you're used to letting impulses decide your actions. But over time, structure removes friction. When decisions are already made, you conserve mental energy. You stop arguing with yourself. You stop wasting cognitive resources on should I, and redirect them to how do I do this better? That's where mastery begins. Most people exhaust themselves, no from hard work, but from constant internal debate. They wake up negotiating, move through the day negotiating, and go to bed disappointed by their own inconsistency. Discipline ends that cycle. It replaces emotional chaos with psychological order. And once order is established internally, performance improves externally. Here's the part that separates discipline as a habit from discipline as an identity. Habits can be broken. Identity is defended. When discipline becomes who you are, skipping what matters doesn't feel like relief, it feels like betrayal. You don't rely on willpower anymore because willpower is limited. You rely on standards, and standards don't ask how tired you are, they ask who you decided to be. Unstoppable people understand that discipline is built in small, almost unnoticeable moments. It's built when no one is watching, when the task feels boring, when progress feels invisible. These moments train the nervous system to tolerate discomfort without panic. Over time, discomfort stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like a signal that growth is happening. That's when most people quit, but that's also when disciplined people lean in philosophically. Discipline is respect for your future self. Every time you follow through, you're casting a vote for the person you want to become. And every time you don't, you're reinforcing the version of yourself you claim you're trying to outgrow. The mind keeps score, whether you acknowledge it or not. The goal. Al isn't to be extreme. The goal is to be consistent. Extreme effort burns out. Consistent effort compounds. Discipline doesn't demand perfection. It demands commitment. And commitment, when practiced daily, becomes unstoppable momentum. When motivation disappears, and it will, the discipline keep moving. And in that movement, they separate themselves quietly, permanently, from everyone who waited to feel ready. Once discipline is in place, the next battle is attention. Because in a world that profits from distraction, focus becomes a revolutionary act. Most people don't fail because they lack talent or opportunity. They fail because their energy is scattered. Their minds are everywhere except where they are. And psychologically, a divided mind can't produce deep work, meaningful progress, or lasting fulfillment. Your attention shapes your reality. Whatever you consistently focus on, you strengthen. Neurologically, the brain wires itself around repeated attention. So when your focus is fragmented, notifications, comparisons, endless inputs, you're training your mind to stay shallow. You're teaching it to jump, react, and abandon tasks the moment discomfort appears. Over time, this erodes patience, resilience, and self-trust. You start projects with enthusiasm and abandon them when the novelty wears off. Not because you're incapable, but because you've trained yourself to avoid depth. Unstoppable people make a choice. They understand that focus is not a personality trait. It's a practice discipline. They deliberately remove distractions, not because they're weak, but because they're serious. They design environments that support concentration instead of testing willpower. This is a philosophical shift from relying on internal strength to creating external structure. You don't prove your discipline by resisting temptation. You prove it by reducing unnecessary temptation in the first place. There's also an emotional component to distraction that rarely gets discussed. Distraction is often avoidance. It's a way to escape discomfort, uncertainty, or the fear of not being good enough. Deep focus forces you to confront your limits. It exposes gaps in skill and understanding. That exposure can feel threatening, so the mind looks for relief, and relief is always one click away. But unstoppable people learn to sit with that discomfort. They understand that clarity comes after confusion, not before it. Philosophically, focus is commitment to depth over dopamine. Quick hits of pleasure train the brain to expect constant stimulation. Focus retrains it to find satisfaction and progress. That shift changes everything. You stop chasing motivation and start building momentum. Time begins to feel different. An hour of focused work produces more confidence than a day of scattered effort. And confidence earned through concentration is far more stable than confidence borrowed from praise or external validation. Focus also clarifies priorities. When everything has your attention, nothing truly matters. But when you limit your focus, your values sharpen. You start asking better questions. What actually moves my life forward? What's noise pretending to be opportunity? This level of clarity isn't accidental, it's cultivated. And once cultivated, it becomes a filter through which you make decisions faster and with less regret. Unstoppable people don't try to do everything. They commit to doing the right things well. They understand that progress is less about speed and more about direction. You can be busy every day and still be stuck. Focus aligns effort with intention. It turns work into craft. It transforms repetition into refinement. And here's the truth most people avoid. Focus requires sacrifice. You will miss out on trends, conversations, and instant gratification. But what you gain is far greater: mastery, self-respect, and measurable progress. Over time, the world starts responding differently to someone who moves with clarity and purpose. Opportunities multiply because people trust those who can stay present and deliver consistently. In the end, focus is not about doing more. It's about doing what matters without apology. When you control your attention, you control your trajectory. And the moment you stop letting the world pull you in every direction is the moment you begin to move powerfully in one. Once focus is sharpened, something else becomes unavoidable: discomfort. And this is where most people quietly step out. Not because they're incapable, but because they've been conditioned to believe that discomfort is a signal to stop. Psychologically, we're taught to associate ease with safety and struggle with danger. But philosophically, that belief is upside down. Discomfort is not a warning sign, it's an invitation to grow. Unstoppable people don't romanticize pain, but they don't avoid it either. They understand that strength, mental, emotional, even moral, is built through resistance. Just like muscles grow by being stressed and repaired, character grows when it's challenged and refined. Every time you choose the harder option when an easier one is available, you're reteaching your nervous system a powerful lesson: discomfort is survivable. And once the mind learns that, fear loses its grip. Most people wait for confidence before they act. But confidence is not a prerequisite. It's a byproduct. It comes after you've done difficult things repeatedly and lived to tell the story. Daily discomfort accelerates this process. It could be pushing your body beyond what feels convenient, having the conversation you've been avoiding, sitting with silence instead of distraction, or staying committed when quitting would feel justified. These moments look insignificant on the surface, but internally, they're transformative. There's a psychological shift that happens when discomfort becomes intentional. When hardship is imposed by life, it feels overwhelming. But when hardship is chosen, it becomes imposed. Wearing. Choice changes meaning. You're no longer a victim of circumstances. You're an active participant in your own development. This is why unstoppable people seek challenge. Not because they enjoy suffering, but because they understand that ease never expanded anyone's potential. Philosophically, daily discomfort is how you break dependency on comfort-based identity. Many people unknowingly define themselves by what feels good, familiar, and safe. That identity is fragile. The moment life applies pressure, and it always does, they collapse. But when you practice discomfort daily, you develop an identity rooted in resilience. You stop asking, is this comfortable? And start asking, is this necessary for who I'm becoming? There's also something important happening emotionally. Avoiding discomfort keeps emotional tolerance low. Small obstacles feel huge. Minor setbacks feel personal. But when discomfort is normalized, emotional regulation improves. You become less reactive. You stop panicking when things don't go your way. You trust yourself to adapt because you've practiced adaptation intentionally. This is how pressure stops breaking people and starts shaping them. Unstoppable people don't wait for life to toughen them up. They train themselves. They understand that comfort weakens when it's excessive, but challenge sharpens when it's controlled. One uncomfortable act a day compounds into mental toughness. Over time, what once felt hard becomes routine. And that's when your standards rise. You no longer tolerate stagnation because growth has become familiar. And here's the part most people miss. Discomfort clarifies purpose. When things get hard, the superficial falls away. You quickly learn what matters and what doesn't. You learn what you're willing to endure and what you're not. That clarity is priceless. It cuts through confusion and aligns effort with meaning. Life stops feeling random and starts feeling intentional. Daily discomfort doesn't make life miserable. It makes it meaningful. It builds a quiet confidence that doesn't need validation, a strength that doesn't announce itself, a resilience that doesn't collapse under pressure. If you want to become unstoppable, stop running from what's hard. Choose it. Because the life you want is on the other side of the discomfort you've been avoiding. After you've learned to face discomfort instead of running from it, the next habit becomes unavoidable. Honest self-evaluation. This is where growth either accelerates or completely stalls. Most people don't lack information, they lack self-truth. They spend more time explaining their struggles than examining their behavior. Psychologically, the ego prefers protection over progress, and blaming external factors feels safer than confronting internal gaps. But unstoppable people choose clarity over comfort. Self-audit is not self-criticism. There's a difference. Criticism attacks identity. Evaluation refines it. When you review your actions with honesty, you're not tearing yourself down. You're sharpening yourself. Philosophically, this is the practice of responsibility. It's the understanding that while you may not control everything that happens to you, you are always responsible for how you respond, adjust, and improve. Unstoppable people build a daily habit of asking hard questions. Where did I waste energy today? Where did I avoid effort? Where did emotion override discipline? These questions are uncomfortable because they remove excuses, but they're powerful because they restore agency. The moment you stop blaming, you start leading your own life. Accountability shifts the focus from what happened to what must change. There's also a psychological payoff to this practice that most people overlook. When you consistently hold yourself accountable, your mind develops trust in your leadership. You stop feeling scattered because you're no longer lying to yourself. Internal conflict decreases. You're not pretending everything is fine when it isn't. That alignment between awareness and action creates inner stability. And stability is the foundation of confidence. Most people wait for failure to reflect. Unstoppable people reflect daily, so failure has less power. They don't wait for consequences to force change. They correct early. This creates momentum. Small adjustments made consistently prevent major breakdowns. It's the difference between steering slightly every day and crashing after ignoring the warning signs for too long. Philosophically, personal accountability is a declaration of ownership over your life. When you accept full responsibility, you reclaim power. Victimhood disappears because it can't survive in a mind that takes ownership. Even setbacks become useful because they contain information. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? You start asking, what is this teaching me? That shift alone changes how you experience adversity. There's also humility in this habit. Self-audit requires admitting you're not finished, not flawless, not above correction. But humility isn't weakness, it's adaptability. The people who grow fastest are the ones who remain teachable. They don't protect their pride, they protect their progress. And progress always demands adjustment. Unstoppable people don't measure themselves against others, they measure themselves against their own standards. That's critical. Comparison creates distraction. Self-accountability creates direction. When your benchmark is internal, You're no longer controlled by validation or criticism. You know where you stand because you've done the work to assess yourself honestly. And here's the hard truth. The quality of your life will never exceed the quality of your self-evaluation. If you're vague with yourself, life becomes vague. If you're honest with yourself, life becomes precise. Precision leads to improvement. Improvement leads to confidence. Confidence leads to consistency. Self-audit is not about dwelling on mistakes. It's about extracting lessons. You don't relive the past, you refine the future. Each day becomes a feedback loop instead of a repetition of the same patterns. That's how stagnation ends. When you hold yourself accountable without excuses and without cruelty, you stop drifting and start directing. And the moment you take full ownership of your actions is the moment your growth becomes non-negotiable. After accountability comes the final test of character. Whether you can continue executing when no one is watching, clapping, or encouraging you, this is where most journeys quietly end. Not because the goal isn't clear, but because the validation disappears. Psychologically, human beings are wired to seek approval. We want feedback. We want confirmation that what we're doing matters. But philosophy teaches us something harder and more enduring. The most meaningful work is often done in silence. Unstoppable people understand that progress is not always loud. In fact, the most transformative growth is almost invisible at first. There's no applause for consistency. No celebration for showing up day after day, doing the same disciplined actions, trusting that they will compound. And this is precisely why consistency without recognition is such a powerful habit. It forces you to confront your true motivation. Are you doing this to be seen, or are you doing this to become? When you rely on external validation, your effort rises and falls with attention. Praise fuels you. Silence drains you. That creates a fragile performance cycle. But when execution becomes internal, driven by standards instead of applause, you become emotionally independent. You don't stop because no one noticed. You don't speed up because someone praised you. You stay steady. And steadiness over time is unstoppable. There's a psychological maturity that develops when you learn to work without recognition. You stop tying your self-worth to outcomes you can't control. You focus instead on process, what you can do today, how well you can do it, and whether you honored your commitments. This reduces anxiety. It sharpens focus. It builds a quiet confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. Philosophically, this is about delayed identity confirmation. Most people want to be rewarded before they've earned it. They want to feel successful while they're still inconsistent. Unstoppable people reverse that order. They become consistent first and let success catch up later. They trust that reality eventually aligns with repeated action. This trust isn't blind. It's built on understanding how compounding works. Small actions, repeated daily, create results that look sudden to outsiders but feel inevitable to the person who stayed committed. Consistency also reshapes how time works in your life. When you execute daily, even without visible results, you stop obsessing over timelines. You're no longer asking, is this working yet? You're asking, did I do my part today? That shift removes impatience. It anchors you in the present. And paradoxically, that's when progress accelerates. Most people overestimate what they can do in a short burst and underestimate what they can do with steady effort. They chase intensity instead of reliability. But intensity burns out. Reliability builds empires. Unstoppable people don't rely on emotional highs, they rely on systems. They show up on average days, bad days, quiet days, especially on quiet days, because those days are shaping something deeper than results. They're shaping identity. There's also humility in silent execution. When you stop announcing your plans, you reduce pressure. You give yourself space to grow without performing. Mistakes become lessons instead of embarrassments. Progress becomes personal instead of performative, and that privacy strengthens commitment. You're no longer proving anything to anyone else. You're proving something to yourself. Eventually, results do show up. They always do. And when they do, people will call it luck, talent, or timing. They won't see the mornings, the discipline, the discomfort, the self-audit, the focus, or the years of quiet execution. But you'll know, and that knowing changes how you walk, how you speak, how you face pressure. Because when you learn to execute consistently without applause, you stop chasing recognition and you become undeniable.